All right, so we're in our notebook, and first thing we're going to do is clear the output. So um, we don't want, actually you got to scroll down a little bit before you see anything, but we're going to go up here to um, cell, uh, all output, clear, and that's going to clear the numbers that are here on the left. Those are the cell numbers, and we're going to clear all the other output. Okay, so yeah, the question.
Is there a difference between cell clear output and kernel?
Yes, so if we do, the kernel is the kernel that's running the notebook. It's the code that's the command that's running everything. So if we restart the kernel, that's not just changing the output, that's actually restarting the whole notebook. And all the variables that you've saved and all the code that you've run is now gone. Of course, if you have the notebook, you can regenerate everything. But yeah, so that's the most comprehensive way to kind of restart your session is to restart the kernel and clear the output. But we just started the kernel, so nothing's been done, so we don't have to restart the kernel. Okay, so I've got the readings here and then the table of contents. If you click on these links, it will take you, it'll jump down to wherever on the page that section begins. And that's all. This is all done with Markdown. So you can look at these cells and see what I wrote and kind of figure out how it works. Markdown is a nice thing to use in Jupyter Notebooks. It's also really useful in GitHub. So I hope that you'll start to learn some of this as you go. Okay. Taking input. In the Learn Python the Hard Way readings, Shaw uses this input command a lot and the argv to take input from the user. They're not really meant for using in Jupyter Notebooks because typically with the Jupyter Notebook, you can just put the name, like you don't need to like go through this process of asking a question like, what do you want this variable to be? Oh, I want it to be 5, and then you store it. That's like, and that's an extra step that you don't need to take, right? You can just store it as a value. But since this can be useful for some programs, we're gonna try it. So, okay. So if this makes more sense when you're running a Python script, but for the purposes of the class, I'll go through it. So if you type x equals input parentheses, it's going to create this cell where it's going to want to know, what do we want? And we just hit enter, and now x has been stored with the value 5. But again, in a notebook, this is kind of silly because we can just do what we have here, where we can say y equals 6 and execute that, and it's set. So the advantage of this is that oftentimes, we're working in the notebook, we're changing things, we're getting everything working, and then you delete all the cells that you don't want, and you just have what's left, and then you can go up here and you can restart and run all. In fact, this is what I want you to do when you turn in your homeworks, because this makes sure that it gives you a nice clean output. All the cells are numbered sequentially. It also makes sure that everything really works the way you intended, and you remove things you don't want. So the nice thing about entering your variables like this is that when you restart and run all, you don't have to go in and be like, oh, it's asking me what I want x to be. Like you already know you want x to be 5 or y to be 6, so you just set that in a cell, and then don't worry about it. Now there's other ways to set variables if you do want them to be truly variables, which is things that you might change from one run to the next, right? Let's say you have an input file and you want to use a different input file every time you run the code, or something like that. There are ways to do that. Notebooks are not as good for that. There are ways that you can take your Jupyter Notebook and export it as a Python script, and then use some of these mechanisms we're about to talk about to to take different information from the user or from another file. So there's this argv module, and it has this or this argv special variable that allows you to take strings, numbers, file names from the user and use them in your script. So this isn't really meant to be used in Jupyter Notebooks, but there's a way we can get around this. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, so typically when we do argv, we're going to first we're going to run this command. So what I've done here is I've shown what I would do if I was using this in a notebook. So argv doesn't work really in notebooks, so what you can do is you can comment out certain parts and replace them with other things that will work in the notebook, and then when you're ready to make it a script, you can change those comments. But normally we would import argv, so we do from sys import argv. That'll import this argv so we can use it, and then we'd say we can store the values that are stored in the argv to different variables. So the way this works is when you are using a script, it'll just look like this. So it'll say from sys import argv, and then if I have so normally when so let's say you exported your Jupyter Notebook, and then you're going to write Python say script .py, and then so you could have, this would be like your bash command line. You'd write the word Python, and then you'd write the name of the script, and then you have arguments, and this will be automatically stored as argv1, argv2, and argv3. Argv you can think of as like argument variable, and this name of the script would be argv0. So this argv thing is a list that contains the names of the different arguments that you pass to the script. So the values here of, so for example, if we wanted to save all this information, we could say, I'm going to say argv0 equals the script. That we're going to say a variable called script, which will be the name of the script. We're going to have argv1 as the first variable, argv2 as the second variable, and argv3 as the third. So we can execute this cell in the Python notebook, and we can just print out the values. But you'll notice I didn't, well, I wasn't even looking, and I picked the same names of the variables from before. That's funny. Okay, so we can specify them directly in Jupyter Notebook, but when we write the Python script, we're going to just type them on the command line. So let's, you can follow along if you want. So what we're going to do is I'm going to copy this text so I can show you what I mean. So again, here we just wrote the names of the values that we wanted for these different values in the notebook, and we commented out the argv part. But down here we're going to have, this is what we would have if we deleted some of the stuff and we just saved it as a script. So we copy this text. We're going to go to our terminal. This screen is taken up with the notebook here, so one of the ways we can free up space or free up a terminal is just type Command T or Control T, depending on your system. That'll open up a tab. And let's go again to our lessons folder. T. It'll be Command T for a Mac. Yeah. Yeah, you can also go up here and see New Tab. So let's do nano, and what we called it here? We called it something.py. So let's call it something.py. That's going to open up a nano window with a new file called something.py. And now, if you're using a Mac, you can just type Command V or whatever your paste shortcut is, or just go up to the menu and type paste. I'm going to add a new line. So I just copied and pasted that file, and now I'm going to exit out. I'm going to hit Control X. And do I want to save? I say yes. Why? Okay. So now I can look at that file, and I can see what's there. So I'm going to run this file now, and I'm going to write Python something.py. Now if I just hit enter, go ahead and hit enter, I'm going to get an error, right? It's going to say value 1 equals argv1, index error, list index out of range. That means I didn't give an argument, I didn't give anything for argv1, so it can't do this operation. So that's fine. I know I didn't supply the argument, so this time I'm going to supply the arguments. I can write 5 space 6 space. Now I think I need. Let's see if I just write hello and enter. Yeah. So that string doesn't need quotes if it's just a single word. If it was multiple words, I could do this. So this is a way we can take input from the command line in a Python script and do something with it. This is very different from how Jupyter Notebooks works, because Jupyter Notebook is this kind of contained thing, and any of these pieces of information that we wanted to pass in the command line, we can just put directly into a command. And so what I do in a Jupyter Notebook, if I am anticipating that in the future I'm going to want to make this like a command line tool, I'll just add some comments here. Say, okay, this is going to be argv0, argv1, argv2, argv3, etc. Right? And in fact, we can spice up this Python script a little bit by importing this exit command with an error. And so if we can say if the length of argv is not 4, it's going to print this command that says here's the usage for this command, and then exit. So this will prevent us from getting an error message. It'll generate its own error message, but it's one that we specified. Question? If you're on a PC, I think you want to go back to Git Bash, or there was another. Yeah. So if you're using Windows 10, there's a, what's it called?
It's called like the Windows subsystem for Linux. If you Google that, it's just like.
If you're using Windows 10, there's a Windows subsystem for Linux, which is a Windows subsystem for Linux, I guess. It's basically a Linux virtual machine or something.
Yeah, it's like Wine for Macs.
Okay. Okay, I haven't used Wine for Macs either, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like the virtual machine.
Okay. So anyway, yeah, if you're using Windows, if you've followed the instructions I gave, if you're using Windows 10, you can do the Windows or the Linux subsystem. But if you're using like another version of Windows, you can use the Git Bash, which is, yeah. So that should, yeah, I'm not sure where. which version of Python it's going to use, I'd have to think about that. Because, one interesting thing, so I didn't activate the Conda environment here. So when I typed Python, it is using the mini-conda version of Python that is Python 3. In fact, I can type Python version. For me, it's Python 3.6. For most of you, it should be 3.7. Anyway, if we wanted to make sure we were using the right version of Python, we should have activated the environment in the terminal, because that will give us not just Jupyter notebooks with the right Python version, but also the command line Python command with the right version.